everyone who is joining us for webinar 163 since the Andean Health Organization Hipólito Unanue Orasconu started this in May 2020. We are going to provide two key messages first. First is that the pandemic COVID-19 has caused a huge delay in the regular immunization programs in the countries, which has increased the risk and reemergence of very difficult diseases. The pandemic left us as a lesson to improve the strategies to ensure the vaccination of everybody throughout their life. Second, the COVID-19 pandemic taught us that the capacities that were built and refurbished in this past 3 years should not go back. The epidemiological development of vaccines and drugs and implementation of prevention measures and a good communication are still fundamental for a society that works very well. And so Horas Conu has a very clear role, an articulating role, and continues opening spaces of discussion and dialogue with the participation of all the sectors to ensure a dignified life to everyone who lives in our countries. Reflections like this and other priorities that are relevant for health can be found in the Notisalud Andina's newsletter that is available on the website of the Andean organism. So along with this, today, Thursday, March 9th, we open our virtual doors to talk about an important topic for our region with the webinar 163, Inclusion of Women in the Digital Revolution, Progresses, Challenges, and Opportunities in the Andean Region. We would like to invite you to help to write down your names and organizations in the chat box. In this same chat box, you can write down the questions or send them via email. In order to have access to the certificates of participation to this webinar, you should fill out a brief survey. Just leave your information on the link that you will find in the chat box of YouTube Live, and the certificate you will get it via email in the next few days. This webinar is going to be developed as usual. We will get the official welcoming words, and then we will have presentations, the active pause or break, and then the Q&A. So I will give the floor to Dr. Maria del Carmen Calle Dávila, Executive Secretary of Horas Conu. Thank you very much, Forley. The need of having digital governance and the participation of the population in it are global needs that after the COVID-19 pandemic hit, very few decision makers dare to evade them or continue postponing them. That's how they implemented measures to digitalize several services that contribute to the exercise of human rights. In the Andean subregion, we saw many progresses, most of them unheard of, in terms of teleworking, teleeducation, and telehealth. However, there are still big deficiencies and flaws in terms of including women in the digital world, not only as consumers, but also as designers and authorities in digital governance. The report called The Progress in the Attainment of the SDGs, Gender Landscape 2022 by UN Women, provides us the following data in terms of the situation of women in terms of technological innovation worldwide. First, all around the world, women perform only 2 out of 10 jobs in the science, engineering, and ICT fields. In the top 20 worldwide technology companies, women account for more than 33% of the labor force in 2022, but hold only 1 out of every 4 managerial positions. Women account for only 16.5% of inventors that are shown on the applications for international patents around the world. The exclusion of women and other marginalized groups of the digital universe has subtracted $1 billion of the GDP in the low and middle income countries in the last decade. If actions are not undertaken, this loss will actually go up to $1.5 billion by 2025. This data makes it clear that access of women to technology is a window to access multiple rights and development. However, it also presents risks for women throughout their lives. According to the studies of the Institute of Development Studies prepared by Jacqueline Hicks, it is estimated that out of the total of women and girls that have access to internet, between 15 and 58% have experienced at some point digital violence between 2018 and 2021. In other studies done in 51 countries that was prepared by the Economist Intelligence Unit, they were able to see that between 2019 and 2020, 85% of women who had access to internet were witnesses of digital violence, and 38% of women had personally experienced violence online. And out of the latter, only 1 out of 4 actually denounced or reported this to the relevant authorities, and almost 9 out of 10 decided to limit their activity online, which actually increases the digital gap. Just like many other types of violence, the digital violence against women affects the most vulnerable ones. For instance, the minors. Most of the adolescents out of 31 countries that were surveyed by Plan International in 2020 reports that their first sexual violence experience against them occurred between 14 and 16 years of age. All of these pieces of data provides us with a quite extensive landscape in the current situation of the participation of women in digital revolution. However, it is important to recognize the progresses. It is important to discuss the feasible and viable strategies and to analyze the mechanisms that will allow to construct an inclusive digital world for women. In order to deal with these points and topics, we have today with us Katia Vera, an expert on cybersecurity from OAS, Deli Goicochea, the winner of Women in Tech Award in 2022 and director of Techie Brains Makers. So I would like to thank them already in advance for sharing their knowledge and to contribute to positioning this in terms of gender. And we do this as part of the International Women's Day. So to everyone who is connected and who's listening and hearing us, welcome to webinar 163 of Horas CONU. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Dr. Calle, for the greetings. After the greetings, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Forli Chavez. I am a professional of public health, member of the technical team of the Andean organization. So now we're going to start by providing the welcome, giving the welcome to Katia Morales. Katia Vera Morales is an expert on gender perspective and human rights in cybersecurity, with over 15 years of professional experience in the public sector, international organizations, and civil society organizations. She currently works as an officer of cybersecurity program projects of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, CICTE, and of the OAS, where she leads the project Closing the Gender Gap in the Latin American and the Caribbean Cybersecurity Agenda 2022-2026. As an international consultant, Katia Vera also collaborates as a project associate with Gender Associations. It's a company that is headquartered in Berlin, focused in the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda of the United Nations. And she gives advisory to the surveillance mechanism of the Inter-American Convention to prevent and eradicate violence against women in terms of online gender violence prevention. Within the country, Katia performed as a director of international affairs at the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs in Mexico, and as Deputy Director General in the National Commission to Prevent and Eradicate Violence Against Women. She is a Mexican lawyer, graduated at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, a master's degree also Erasmus Mundus on the studies on gender and women at the Central European University in Austria and the Università di Bologna in Italy. She also has a master's on human rights and guarantees by the National Institute in Mexico, and also studied at the Academy of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law by the American University Washington College of Law. Welcome, dear Katia Vera. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Forley, for this introduction. Thank you for the invitation. We're very happy to be here and for having invited us today to talk about online gender violence. And also, Deli, hello. It is a pleasure to be connected online. And everybody, hello. And thank you for being here today. I'm going to share my screen, and also if I go too fast, because it can happen, let me know. So when you are, when you get carried away, and just let me know. So you can see here, I think my screen, yes. Okay, so thank you very much. I am Katia Vera, and I was, kindly introduced. I am the program officer for the cybersecurity program at the OAS. And so today what I need to do is to summarize in the next 20 minutes what is the situation in the region in terms of online gender violence, and to provide some recommendations as well. So here we, you just want to say that these are my personal opinions. These are not the OAS opinions or of the member governments. I just want to start, just to provide some context and background to the audience in saying where I come from and, what is the perspective that I will share. I don't know if you all know, but the OAS, Organization of American States, has a cybersecurity program. That's where I work, that is in charge of promoting cooperation throughout the continent for the development of public policies in terms of cybersecurity and capacity building, and also to promote research in topics like cyber threats, and also to promote a greater knowledge, which is one of the topics that I will dwell on today. And then I would also like to start my presentation by inviting everyone, especially women who are joining us today, by asking them what are the activities that you don't do every day, or what are the behaviors that we are changing online, just thinking that something can happen to us online. And this is very important because we can realize then how throughout our days we limit our participation online just because out of fear of what could happen to us. So I just want you to think about this. Just think about it. It's food for thought, and then during the Q&A round we're going to go back to that. Now, briefly, what I would like to share with you, if time allows it, is to talk about the background of where this issue comes from, what the cybersecurity program of the OAS has done in terms of online gender violence, some basic concepts, and I think it's important to have them clear, and also an invitation to think and to reflect about on how online gender violence shows human rights, and then what is the position, the measures, and then finally some recommendations that we believe are fundamental to promote empowerment of women or gender equality online. So having said this, I just want to briefly look at where gender violence starts online in the region, or when we started looking at it more closely. As Mari Carmen said, the statistics are showing that there is a disproportionate impact against women and girls if we talk about online gender violence. There was a first study that was published by the United Nations, and that already showed that 53% of women, that this is back in 2015, had suffered at least one form of gender violence online. The special rapporteur of the United Nations also on gender violence published a first report in 2019, and saying that 23% of women already had suffered harassment online. And then also regionally, the cybersecurity program had identified this topic as a big concern in the Americas. And so they published a paper on online gender violence. And then when the pandemic hit, and understanding that there was a need to see what were the risks, or what were the women going through in this accelerated digitalization, there was a publication on the risks during the pandemic, and this is what women were going through. And then also in partnership with the Inter-American Commission, that is also part of the OAS, they published a manual on online gender violence and a report, the first regional report actually on this topic. And then, as was announced also when I was introduced, the OAS also started implementing the strategy that is seeking to close the digital gap, and of course looking at online gender violence. So these are the different publications that we have, and where I took some of the recommendations to share with you today and to be able to reflect on them. And so, of course, understanding that this will be an invitation for you to look at them later. You can consult them, you can read them later. So what are the challenges that we have looked at by studying gender violence online? We identified that throughout the region, but also worldwide, there is a lack of statistical information that will allow us to identify how this is what's happening with this. And then also in the public discourse and the daily narrative, there is the understanding that this kind of violence is not real, or that it is less severe or less grave. And unfortunately, the response of the states have been differing, they have been different. some other challenges that we have identified is that there is also a lack of engagement between or linkage between the strategies and the promotion of strategies of promote against violence. There is no matching that will allow to have an integral approach. We don't have advanced analysis of human rights online and with a gender perspective, and also, like I said, like Maria del Carmen said, the existence of gender biotypes and technology that affects also the participation of women. So we have one of the most important challenges has been to be able to deal with the complexity that comes with gender violence, because definitely now so many terms have been used that there is confusion about this. And obviously this has had an impact on the security of safety of women who do not necessarily know or know how to name the experiences they are living. What are the strategies that we identify as viable to be able to impact the needs of having a clear concept and this complexity? We may think that this is an open dynamic term and that but there is also, even though it's dynamic, and as what happens in technology is that there is also a series of elements that allow us to identify to see where they are and when we're talking about gender violence. Now, the Inter-American Commission of Women and the commission, they published a document, a concept document, to see how can we understand online gender violence, going back to what the Belém do Pará Commission understands as gender violence. And then they say that online gender violence is any action or behavior against women based on gender that can cause death, damage, or physical suffering. And the key is that these should be committed, instigated, or aggravated partly or totally with the assistance of technology, information and communication technologies. And so what are the other indispensable elements that we find in on online gender violence? And women are the main victims, and when they are in a social structure that is unequal, that goes against gender and that transcends the digital space, and it has real actual impact on women. But it's also it's not a new phenomenon, but it's just a reflection of gender discrimination that exists and has been existing outside the technological space, and it's a concept that is also evolving and evidently it's something that goes against human rights. So it is important to look at the continuum of violence, and we see that we are talking about violence that flows and that is part of a generalized pattern of violence that try to put women in an inferior position. And it is important here to understand that all forms of violence are forms of coercion, abuse, or aggression that look to control or the lives of women, either in online or offline. But here we're talking about two continuum. It's a new continuity between the online spaces and offline spaces. And and then something else is that technology also provides new types of violence, because now it's all immediate. It can be rapidly expansion and turn into viral. It permanently stays, and it has a replicability, a global scope, and also the possibility that violence can then follow the victims. And so it is important also to have this in mind, this continuum.
Y más en plataformas de redes sociales vemos que están vinculadas con esta idea del amor romántico y que generan cibercontrol y limitación de la vida digital de las mujeres. Cosas como, por ejemplo, obligar a la
For
pareja
instance, to
a tener
force the partner to share the passwords, or to
eliminación
force
directa de contactos con otras
to,
personas,
to be forced to eliminate someone from
controlar
your
qué tipo de comentarios
list of
permites,
contacts, or to control what type of
establecer cualquier
comments you're
tipo de
doing.
control
And
hacia
so
la
that is
pareja,
cyber control,
que es una conducta
even though it looks as if it is
común y
a
corriente.
common behavior.
Em, y también lograr
And then
la mayor
also,
parte de las mujeres que
most of
violentan
the
físicamente
victims of violence, they
vemos
knew
de nuevo esta
the
desigualdad
perpetrators before. And
que
so
afecta
we
hombres
see
y
that this is
mujeres
a continuity of violence that is now
y
affecting the
también
online
buscamos
spaces. And as Maria del Carmen said,
cómo está afectando esto a la
who are
violencia y en este
being
contexto
affected the most?
basado en
And
género
because it is based on gender
la estructura
and the
sistémica
structure
de
of the systemic
discriminación
discrimination that we live
afecta
offline,
a todas
this
estas
affects
personas
any
vulnerables.
person, any woman that is online.
Y es
But as
interesante
it is
ver que la
intersectional,
sociedad
cross-sectional, and there is an intersectionality, just like it happens with the offline violence.
está fijada con
It is also,
condiciones de vulnerabilidad o de
it can be
discriminación
applicable to other types of vulnerability and discrimination. It
personas
can affect more, uh,
pertenecientes a la comunidad
people who belong
LGBTQ
to
en específicas
LGBTQ community, ethnical
familias con
um,
perfil público,
communities, and also women with a public
feminidad,
profile, journalists, human rights
para
advocates,
silenciar
etc., because they try to silence
este
them online. They try to
uso de
put women
este tipo de
among
violencia
these
que
gender
podría
stereotypes that permeate
de
in
manera
our
externa
society.
también
Young
identificar
women are
como
we also identify that
con más
they
riesgo
are one of the victims, and
violencia en línea.
potentially the ones
Ya
to
también
be suffering the
la
most.
relación
And then
íntima
also those who are in a sexually active relationship also being
los responsables
are more prone to suffer
son
from physical violence. And so there is a constant
no solo
debate here, because it's not
cometer
only thinking about
situación de
how
violencia
men also
intrafamiliar o
suffer
discriminación
violence
básica
online,
que
and
imagino y lo entiendo
etc.
que
And the truth
existe,
is
pero
that
quien más
it is
vulnerable
true,
se siente
but we see that there is
es
a
su madre,
pattern, a
quien
generalized
es
pattern.
hombre y quien se declara
And the
femenino,
one
tiene una identidad
we see
sexual
that there is an identity, and usually,
sus parejas
usually they're we see that they are
de familia
partners, family members, friends, but also people that we don't know or that we know.
lo que les decía,
And
40%
so what I was
de
saying,
las víctimas
40% of
ya
victims
acusamos
knew already their
sin términos medios
offenders, and in some cases also the perpetrators already had a relationship with them,
víctima.
with the
Y
victim.
esto también
And so this is just like something
social, porque vemos
that
que es una
needs to be
imagen
analyzed, because
de
95% of those responsible of distributing
una pareja que
non-consensual intimate images are former
también es
partners,
muy solidaria
spouses, or family members. And this is something also that there's now organized groups, bots, and trolls that are a huge problem in the region. And they do campaigns, massive campaigns to attack women online.
evidentemente
And then
que hay varias
obviously this implies that there are several
responsables
responsible ones. There's
institucionales
original
que
perpetrators, like I said at the beginning, who steals and manipulates information, distributes images without the consent,
a retuitear,
but also,
a publicar, a compartir esta información dañina. Y en cuanto a impactos,
and then in terms of
tenemos pocos
impact, we
estudios
see that there's very few studies done
científicos que
on the damages that women suffer that are victims of
aun
online
cuando
gender
daños con
violence.
una seriedad
And even though
daños con una seriedad
it
que se puede
really
equiparar
can
a crímenes
create damages
que
that
fueran
are equal
justificables.
to the offline violence.
Según las
And,
investigaciones,
according to the
casi
investigations and
no
research
existe
that we do, there's no difference between, the impact that occur off and online.
esto
But
afecta
definitely this affects their online activity. They
por eso mi
change
pregunta es
the, interactions online. And that's why I
cómo
asked
está
this
cambiando la vida
first.
offline
There's, censorship, and there's
cómo
isolation, and
afecta
of
esta
course,
época
during
virtual en la
this
que las mujeres pueden
implies
participar
that
en
women can be left
diferentes
outside of all the discussions.
relacionales
And also there's
esta discriminación
a
online y offline.
discrimination, offline, online discrimination, and it lasts longer. And so very rapidly, I'm going to go really fast because I don't have the time. But, on these studies, we found types of online gender violence and how it is manifested, and the most common ones, at least the ones that we could see in the region. And so this is why I am telling you that you should look at the publications, cyber harassment and bullying, and it's also uh, identity theft, and sharing images online without consent. And I will only talk about three because otherwise I won't have the time. But among the attacks that we have identified the most is the creation, dissemination, distribution, or exchange of intimate material without the consent of women, just to stigmatize them or damage them. So this is what is known as porn retaliation, but actually it's just creation, dissemination, distribution, or exchange of intimate material. So we also see the use, manipulation of information in a non-authorized way by stealing passwords or installing malware or stealing the hardware. It seems as if if we talk about doxing, it is something that is, far away, but at least fourth of the internet users have been victims of doxing at least once. So, someone publishing personal information about them without their consent. And these, of course, can have huge impacts. Like, for instance, that they publish your address, your physical address, and then somebody can actually go to your house and attack you and do something to you physically. And then there's also cyber harassment or cyberbullying that women face daily on the digital spaces by, submitting threatening messages, attacking, using language, inviting to sexual violence against women, etc. So all of this array of, manifestations in terms of online gender violence, they have to be analyzed with a human rights approach. And we need to really look at the human rights approach. And this is very important because when we see in detail what this involves against women, a lot of times we see that there are different violations of human rights. And this is a table of all the conventions and agreements and treaties that have been signed by the member countries. But of course, it is important to just look at this and understand that all of these attacks that go against these human rights covenants. And now, what about the regional situation? What are the trends, and what are, according to what we have studied at the OAS in terms of online gender violence? There are some positive legislation trends. So more and more countries are now doing some amendments to their laws to prevent, investigate, and sanction these specific manifestations of online violence. I don't know if you've heard the law, the modification of the law in Mexico, but also in Ecuador, Brazil, Argentina. There's now discussions about these and some laws that are now being studied, and then also regional organizations that are now trying to call for action. Successful measures that we have identified also in the region, like assistance to the victims, protection, and the laws that I was talking about, awareness raising, and something that is just starting, but they are, doing is publication of data. However, and this is where, I'm trying to talk about, this is the last part, and with this I close. One of the biggest challenges that we see in the cybersecurity program is that there is a lack of knowledge in terms of digital security for women. And there is also lack of recognition as one of the most important elements to empower women, to promote gender equality. And we're not necessarily really doing the best. And sometimes we don't really know exactly what cybersecurity means. People think it's something too technological and it doesn't apply to you, but really, in general terms, it only means to reduce risks and looking at preventing threats online. And so we're calling for action so that we can take the recommendations and for all women, and because the way in which we take care of our online spaces and the way in which we can, have safe passwords and, two-step authentication, etc., it's going to limit gender violence online. So I would like to close with this, but please, I invite you to go to our website, look at the manuals and recommendations to see, uh, you know, safe sexting, to prevent the non-consensual distribution of images, and then also to document if you were a victim. If you know that someone has been a victim, then we need to document it, because there are some strategies to respond and to help. And it goes from, should I respond to to the offender? Should I block them, or just create a community? So, well, with this, I wrap up. And if there are any questions, just, let me know. I hope that this information has triggered a few ideas in your head. And well, I'm here to help you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katia. It was an excellent presentation. Katia has talked about security of women in the digital world and the current situation of online gender violence against women. She shared from her experience in the cybersecurity program at the DOAS, and has highlighted the importance of recognizing first the violence online as a way of violence, as a form of violence, because it is still something that has not been explored too much, and let alone recognized as a form of violence. However, it is increasingly important. And so we do have some challenges. And first of all is to, as Katia says, to talk about these, to discuss, to create spaces like this where we talk about this as a problem. But then also it's important to have a clear concept of violence. And with this, we can have a diagnosis of the real situation. And it has shown how there are different contexts of family violence and how they are migrating towards the digital world, and what we can call cyber control, how violence now can be exerted on this, control on social media, or what you comment, how they use their cell phones, or sharing the passwords, etc. And so that should be recognized again as a way of violence. Uh, she also mentioned that they have identified approximately 40 or 50% of women are part of the environment of the person. They are not someone who they don't know.
La distribución no consensuada de imágenes son la forma más común de violencia, la difusión de imágenes íntimas. Con respecto a la legislación para prevenir y sancionar la violencia, Katia nos menciona que aún sigue siendo un reto en la región. Sin embargo, hay muchos estados que vienen avanzando en el tema. Estimada Katia, reiteramos el agradecimiento por la disertación, y a continuación te pedimos amablemente.
Next, we're going to look at the questions. A few questions are the following. How can women be identified that are in an unsafe space online? How can they know if they are in an unsafe space? And now that we are, what are the red flags? So I would say that just like offline gender violence, I think I don't know if we should talk about offline and online, because they are, they are intertwined. But anything that you don't feel that is comfortable or safe, you just have to question that. And that probably is a red flag. And the basis for online gender violence, just like it occurs online, is to maintain women in a submissive position. That's the idea, right? That's the goal of the control of cyber control and cyber violence. Usually there's comments online that are looking to say, well, you don't belong here, you cannot give an opinion, your opinion doesn't matter. Uh, so anything that at first looks at something uncomfortable, it's important. That's why I said it's important to have some elements that look like gender violence, because usually what we see is that women feel these experiences, but they don't know how to name them, or they don't know exactly what they are. And so, oh, so, his my partner is asking me for my password, but that's not violence. That's just, a matter of trust. So no, the idea here is to know exactly what is defined as online gender violence and to know what the behaviors are. And then I think it's
Sí, excelente. ¿Y
okay,
me podrías
excellent.
compartir o
And
algunas
then maybe
experiencias
are there any
actuales con
experiences
respecto
and
de las
spaces
mujeres
where
niñas de derecho a
women
votar
can
y
participate
tener espacios de
and to
derecho
have
a votar, también cómo ser parte
or to
de
know how to
activistas, tanto en
identify maybe
Nigeria
as an
como en
activist
España para las
to
mujeres
promote cybersecurity for women? Are there any spaces or experiences like that? Yes, fortunately, there is an active movement of women in cyberspace that is really disseminating a lot of information. So from the start, I can say that there are different organizations, Fundación Carisma in Colombia, Luchadoras in Mexico, Hiperderecho in Peru, and they are constantly promoting spaces and forum to disseminate and to raise awareness about online gender violence. Because the truth is that in Latin America is really a challenging region because we share the language, but violence can become viral very rapidly. And so many of the threats that we see and maybe they happen in Peru, they get replicated and they go all the way to Mexico and well, Brazil. I know it's different, but we've seen some participation, but it can definitely go become viral really fast. But then prevention also from from women, it's something that is being disseminated, and we're creating communities online. So my first recommendation would be to really look at what they're doing. The civil society organizations and many governments are also doing this, and then we have courses online, and we want to have maybe networking throughout the region to be able to connect women and to provide them with information on cybersecurity.
excelente. Y bueno, la última
Great.
pregunta
And then the last
sería,
question is,
sabemos que este
we
tema de
know
violencia es
that
generador
this
de
issue of violence has to be seen by different sectors and from different angles. But if you need to define or assign one role to the health sector, what would it be? What would it be this role for the health sector in terms of cybersecurity? Well, that is a very interesting question, because I would relate it to the issue of knowing exactly what the damages are, because we know now that gender violence is a worldwide epidemic, and the WHO has recognized it as such. And so understanding that all of these violences are interconnected and intertwined, we need to see and we need to think that online gender violence is also part of this pandemic of violence. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, the impacts and the damages, because studies are already showing that women victims of violence say that they feel it just as they feel violence offline, and they feel it in the body. That is, when I read this comment, I feel it here and here, in their bodies. And so definitely the health sector is crucial to understand these impacts, and then to really understand what can be done. because we're still, they think that online gender violence is not as important, or, it's when definitely there are impacts on the body and on their health.
Entonces creo que iría por ahí y me gustó mucho la pregunta.
So, well, thank you very much for the question. It was a really good question. Yes, definitely. Thank you, Katia, for your presentation and for the excellent answers. And hope you can stay until the end of the event. I'll try. Thank you. Next, we have, well, I'm going to give the floor to Ruby Diaz. Ruby is a public health, global health expert, member of the Orascolu team. Thank you for the introduction, dear Forley. Thank you, everybody who is here today with us. Next, to continue with the presentations, I would like to give the warmest welcome to Deli Goicoechea. Deli Goicoechea is the CEO of Techie Brains Makers. She's the winner of the Women in Tech Award in Latin America and a world runner-up of Women in Tech Global Awards. Likewise, from the academic standpoint, she is an expert on digital communication, social and corporate communication. She has a master's degree on communication management from the Murdoch University from Australia. She has an international certificate in measurement and evaluation, International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication, and the PR Academy from England. She is a member of the Institute for Arts Integration and STEAM and part of the professional program Thinking in the Future, Scenarios and Strategic Perspectives. She has worked in for international companies and national companies like HP, Xerox, Autodesk, Claro, among others. Internationally, she was part of the advocacy team for the nonprofit World Vision Australia. Welcome, dear Deli Goicoechea. The floor is yours, and you have 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. It is an honor for me to be here, being joined by the other panel members, Katia and yourselves. It is a great honor. And then also, I'm very happy to be able to share with you my presentation, because I was listening to Katia and I was thinking my presentation goes on one hand, and this, there's a, but you will see this, I will share my presentation. I just want you to confirm that you can see my presentation.
Ya está. ¿Me podrían confirmar, por favor?
So, can you see it? Is it okay? Great. So I will talk about this stage that, of women that is so important when we are in a primary school or high school, we are adolescents, and just to show how important it is to work. Everybody, all of us women, we need to work and trying to look at this, because if we don't really work on it when we should and how we should, then we will have the consequences that we have today. So just to begin with, and I think this is very much related to technology, because at Techie Brains, we believe that technology really has they exist, and we need to know them and work with them. Just to show you how women are in the technological world and the opportunities that women have around the world. And if today we start really focusing on our girls and women, in the future we are going to have 75 of the future work will require STEAM skills, and later on what STEAM is, but it is very much related to all of these science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so this is our opportunity to work with them, because before we never really thought of this, and we never thought that if you had a company and you could hire someone that would work only on Facebook and only devoted to, be able to manage Facebook content. So a few years ago, when I studied at the university, I studied communications. They never taught me about, Facebook, Instagram, or social media, but this career is out there now, and they are paid salaries, paid positions. And so we need to think about this and what are we going to have in terms of technology. But then we also find that only one women out of four and four men work in the technological space. And so this is also a challenge for us. And then we also see that 22% of all the professionals that work today in the artificial intelligence world are women. That is, over 75% are men. And when we talk about machine learning, that is also very much related to technology and innovation. Only 12% of the total of the researchers are women. And so we now find this work that we have to do so that we can overcome. This is a study according to UNESCO dating back to 2020. And this is where we have this issue, this topic that gathers us today. We look at these gaps, and maybe these statistics are done by analyzing mature professional women when they are already working. But if we go back and if we start working since they're very little, we will create change, because this is already the consequences. So, for instance, we did an interview, increase of the participation of women in STEAM throughout Latin America. We did this with UNESCO. So whenever you ask girls or adolescents, we do a survey about the STEAM careers like engineering and science and technology, as we said, we find that during high school, only 1% of girls really thought about pursuing these careers. Well, it's always, this traditional thinking that these are more careers for men. And so that is going to have a consequence, a real actual consequence when they start the university, because 70% are related to career in arts and only 3% in STEM careers. And that percentage, of course, is going to increase the digital gap. And that's why the statistics that are so grueling. And if we look at this snapshot, we are going to identify the fact that we need to work with our girls since they're very little until they finish high school, so that we can motivate them, because that's when everything starts. But why everything starts there? Because our society and our community were full of stereotypes. We're full of stereotypes, and believe it or not, since we're very little, we have the imposter syndrome. And that is that we don't believe this, because we're always demanding more from us. If we achieve something, we feel that, well, we did it maybe because it was out of luck or something. But we have that since we're very little. And I have three questions from the Imposter Syndrome book by Elizabeth Kadosh and Anne de Montarlot, saying why in school the girls believe they have not studied enough and boys think that the exam was too hard. They feel that they should have studied more to get a better grade, while while boys say, oh no, the test was too hard. Since we're very little girls, we're always demanding more from ourselves. And even though statistics show that girls get better grades, they're still lacking confidence, and something that is going to influence profoundly in their professional development later on. And so we're always thinking that we could have done better. And why most of women feel that they are a fraud in their jobs, and that their successes are only a result of good luck. And this is something that happens, and this happens to us women and to the girls, because we transmit this from generation to generation. In Latin America and worldwide, we live in this culture where girls are they have to do this and that, and they have to do certain things, and we are always in these mental boxes. And so we're trying to change things up and to say, okay, we need to really have gender equality. And just by looking at these factors, and as I said, and what is happening, according to this study, they say that the lack of awareness of the STEM careers and misunderstanding also of the society, because they feel that STEM or STEAM careers are hard, and so this can only be done by a boy. And so since very little we're thinking of this. And this is when we have the job that the private sector has to do, and the government, and really having the infrastructure that is needed, uh, because it's not only the public schools, but also private ones. This is something that we need to work on. And how can we change this? And this different activities that we can do to change. Uh, from a young age. Like I said, we have to start very early on in their lives. And then, of course, we were talking about sexism in society is very marked, and particularly in the academic world, where we always see, if you see a woman, succeeding, they always ask, well, what happened there? What it was luck or something. But if it's a man, we will just, oh, that's great. It's a common thing. But if she's succeeding, people start saying, oh, well, if she has kids, then she's neglecting their kids. And, it's a very serious problem. And it completely goes against hinders the success of women. And then also the lack of awareness and dissemination and between ourselves. And this is why we have this imposter syndrome and not wanting to recognize our own work and to recognize other women. It's a lack of dissemination of models and female roles and role models and the schools, and to show that there are a lot of women who have achieved this. And little by little, we will be able to remove these stereotypes that science, math, technology, engineering is too hard and it's not for women. Because if we think like that, we will definitely continue having the results that we have now. So these factors, I think, are important, and they influence this. It's, the family, the school, society. And this study came out with these conclusions, and it really shows us the reality. And we really know that we need to start working. And yeah, we need to work. We already have women in the universities and women working, but I think we need to start go beyond that, so that we can start doing the changes. And so, of course, this is going to be a long-term job, and it's not going to be done overnight. And as I said, also, to be able to change this, we need education, and that's the most important thing. We need to educate not only boys, but also educate parents, and to have these talks in the schools and uh, with the teachers, and they need to talk about these topics, participate in all the activities that can be developed in Latin America, to be able to not only reach adult minds, but also to the girls and boys, so that everybody can really be part of the change. And as I'm going to tell you also why we started doing this work, we think that first of all, we need education, and then, of course, is technology. And we need to be hand in hand with technology. And that's why Techie Brains was created. And because we do believe that we need to transform the future, but we need to do it in a fun way. And because we are aimed at, smaller girls, it has to be fun and engaging. And this is the way in which you can reach the girls now, and just removing this stereotype, saying, no, this is not for me, this is too hard, this is just for boys. Because I think women, we can create changes, and there's tools that are already there to teach at a young age. I'm talking about 5 years old, to really, to program and to move blocks. And we already have tools. We don't have to invent anything, but the state and the private institutions, they need to start really doing this profound job of doing this at a very young age. And there are countries, in developed countries, there are activities that are being done at the school. And it is also, And there's innovation and entrepreneurship. And we also think sometimes that entrepreneurship is only for the one that wants to be an entrepreneur. But no, it's just to start anything, something, and to inspire and to motivate so that they can start in a project. And then, of course, learning has to go hand in hand with apps and games and things that are attractive to young people. And that's why we are looking for gender equality that we are trying to achieve, and also in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And ultimately, it is that if we actually achieve gender equality and then we go to quality education, if we provide quality education in both public and private schools, in the future, we will uh, have really decent jobs and dignified jobs to reduce all of these inequalities, and then to reach uh, this is uh, teamwork. And this is something that, we are working in SDG number 5, and then 4, and then 8, which is decent job, and 10, reduction of inequalities, and finally 1 with no poverty in general. And so this is a commitment that we have, and we would like to invite the society to work with kids at a very young age. And the idea is well, the British Council says that for us to really achieve this change, and it's a study that I showed you, we need to inspire, we need to motivate girls at a very young age, between the information and very young age and decisions, and recognize women in science as well. Now, as we talked about education, it is also important to identify that, I've heard what STEM is and what STEAM is, and Delhi has explained, and they say, well, girls don't like math or science and technology, but what are this acronym? What is this acronym? So we have a difference there with an A, right? Because and these are acronyms that are in English, of course, and we will then how we interpret them. So S is from science, T technology, E engineering, and M mathematics. And so far, that's it was always a work. But how do we see it really? Now there's a new trend and a new current, which is first is STEM and then there's STEAM. How do we see it? So in this new trend, we agree that in order to attract children, because they are still children, they're still adolescents, and so it still has to be fun. And finally, for them not to lose it, because they know that creativity, as they grow up, kids then lose their creativity and then their spontaneity, and they think that they're not as creative. And when you're an adult, they say, well, you're creative, and they say, no, I'm not very creative. We're all creative, but we need to work on it always, all the time, since we're very little. And this is where we understand and we follow this trend, which is STEAM, which includes art. So it's science, technology, art, engineering, and mathematics. There are studies showing that when you start studying sciences and you start making them fun, and you work with music and drawings and illustrations and different activities that have to do with art, dance, then there's better results. And then the kids get more motivated. And so there's studies done saying that school dropout rates are coming down thanks to this technology, to this methodology, sorry, to start looking at art and creativity as part of this. That's why at Techie Brains, this is our motto. I love this slide really, because this is the STEAM and entrepreneurship. We are going to change the world. STEAM, as I already said, with arts and creativity, and then entrepreneurship is to motivate, start a project, transform, and experiment. And that's how we can really get hooked with, the girls. And so we have done a program in Peru. And this was also winner last year among 28 countries in the category of gender equality. And now we have reached over 5,000 girls giving technology classes. And so it's just to teach how to program with these tools. This is just a Scratch tool. This is a tool from 6 years on, but there's also the Scratch Junior tool, which is for older kids where they can look at their different variables. And then, and for instance, I want to show you the video.
Con el objetivo de cerrar las brechas de género, promover igualdad de oportunidades e impulsar la participación de mujeres en tecnologías y materias STEAM, se capacitó a más de 1.000 niñas de entre 8 a 14 años en el programa Niñas Digitales Perú.
Para mi niña fue una experiencia inolvidable, ya que le tomó mucho interés al curso y estaba muy emocionada.
Estas nuevas herramientas que ella está aprendiendo va a poder desarrollar mucho mejor sus aprendizajes.
Estas niñas, provenientes de todo el país, aprendieron a programar utilizando Scratch, una plataforma desarrollada por el MIT Media Lab de Massachusetts.
Le ha permitido a mi niña conocerse, valorarse, impulsarse incluso en este mundo digital.
Considero que ella se ha sentido bastante motivada. Últimamente la he visto investigando sobre biografía de mujeres empoderadas, mujeres que han servido de inspiración.
Para 2025, Latinoamérica va a necesitar 1.2 millones de desarrolladores de software, lo que hace importante el aprendizaje y la motivación a temprana edad de las niñas, quienes mediante estos cursos tendrán las herramientas necesarias para estas potenciales carreras.
Bicentenario del Perú 2024.
Siempre con el pueblo. Gobierno del Perú.
Okay. Y entonces, como vemos,
So, as we can see, in this case, the Digital Girls program, the idea is to teach the girls to create a digital story, but it should be a digital story related to technology, so that we can now unite technology and content and education. And so what we do is a dialogue between the girl and a woman that inspires her. And there is a conversation there. So we call for a contest for women, for girls to do their stories after the classes that were given to them. And we got a lot of projects. Some of them chose Peruvian scientists because this contest was in Peru, but then others were worldwide, and then they would talk to the scientists and they did their own dialogues and they sent them to us. And so it's inspiring girls and at the same time educating them on technology, which is an important tool. And that's why we have other ways of showing. This is a video that I'm going to show how, with these tools that we have, we can start educating at a very young age on different areas, and children can do different social programs. And among them, we also have gender equality.
Para poder compartir el otro video que les quiero mostrar. También me confirman, por favor, si todo está bien. Vamos a ponerlo ahí. Y ahí está.
Jóvenes de hoy se entretienen conversando. Los niños y jóvenes de hoy se entretienen conversando por redes sociales, viendo YouTube, descargando apps y jugando videojuegos. Entonces, ¿te has preguntado cómo hago para que se diviertan en este mundo digital y al mismo tiempo se preparen para su futuro? Quizá no sabías que jugando con la programación pueden crear proyectos que promueven un mundo sostenible, mejorando la gestión del medio ambiente, enseñándonos a los adultos, por ejemplo, a reducir el fomento de la basura. Seguro no te imaginabas que la realidad virtual puede enseñarles a tu hijo y a ti a prevenir accidentes relacionados a la seguridad y salud en el trabajo, y que con la realidad aumentada puede acercarse a ti sin estar a tu lado y recordarte que está en casa esperándote. Y que puede jugar creando una aplicación móvil, promoviendo un mundo más equitativo, como el app Yo Igual Tú, que busca educarnos a todos diciendo que la equidad de género empieza por nosotros. Con estos talleres de creación tecnológica, los niños y jóvenes de hoy cambiarán nuestro mundo, se divertirán, aprenderán muchísimo e inclusive terminarán enseñándonos a los adultos cómo ser mejores personas y profesionales. Así que anímate y conviértelos en pequeños tecnoemprendedores.
Aquí está, voy a dejar de compartir y compartirles mi pantalla nuevamente. Entonces, como se dieron cuenta...
So sorry, again, so it's, the idea of showing them is how can you relate and inspire the children to learn technology, but at the same time, it's getting content in them. So I just wanted to tell you, this is a workshop that we have, which is teaching the children to create this app, mobile app, where you can, you teach them the variables and you teach them how to program with a very easy basic programming and, block programming. But at the same time, it's talking about the application is called You and Me, We Are the Same. And so we talk about gender equality, and there's a lot of questions and they answer about the stereotypes, and it has 3 parts, which is understanding what gender equality is, because we know that there is a lot of misunderstanding of what it is when we talk about this. And that's why we have the 3 E's. So eliminating stereotypes, and then we check these stereotypes that we know, and then starting and adding actions and measures to change this. So while the kid is learning to program, they also have all the content and they learn the content, and they will have to do this. And once they have included the content, they program, and they do this 12 years of age on. And then there's something else, and I really like this project, this new project. I love it because it's very new, and it's about education on gender violence, and because it is important to teach our little girls from a very young age. And this is for adolescents, but we also have one for little girls, and it's all aimed at eliminating violence against women. And it is called signals. So it's like you identify the signals or the red flags to know if you are really going through a violent relationship with your boyfriend, or if you see that one of your friends is actually having a violent relationship with their boyfriend. So what does this application have? It's like a list of questions where they start saying, yes, I've seen this in my friend, and I've seen that she's been changing her mood, and that she's been moody, and or you can do them yourself too, and then you realize, well, yes, I think I am actually going through this violent relationship. And the idea is that we teach them how to program, and then we give them the content, and then they start doing this on their own. And it's a workshop that it has a dual objective: to learn technology, and at the same time to learn about this topic that is so important that we've seen in the previous presentation, which is working on eliminating this, violence, and to be aware. I was listening to Katia when she said that, some of that boyfriends sometimes tell their girlfriends, "Oh, you have to give me your password." That is also violence. That's not a matter of trust. And I know about this, and I have a daughter, and I'm always telling her, it's like, "Oh no, but we between our friends, we say that we need our passwords on, or our boyfriends say, what are you doing online?" And that is already gender violence, and we need to know that. We need to start educating the girls, and
Qué importante es trabajar sobre esto desde muy pequeñas. También tenemos la otra parte que también nos empodera, que
and
es la
then we also have the other part which empowers us, which is financial education. We have another program called Creating Your Savings. And so it's like when you start putting your tips or your allowances, and then you put it in the piggy bank, it's the same here. And then little by little, it will tell you how much money you have. And so apps and workshops are very simple, obviously, because these are for kids and for adolescents. But of course, this is, the way we want to share. We just like we had with Scratch, and we talked about the Digital Girls program, about inspiration of women In this case, we have the workshop on how to contribute with the environment, and it's a video game where you can create it yourself. And so that's something else that we have done in search for this. So from our standpoint, we think that we need to work on this important stage and work on this important stage so that we can have the statistics. And we always say that when you need to start looking in the long term, and you need to start now. So if we really are committed and we really want to do these changes, we need to start now, and we need to start at home and with our girls at a very young age. So I would like to invite you to transform the world, today's world, with technological abilities. That is a basic thing, and technological abilities that are also related, because that is going to lead us to gender equality and to understand what that is. So that was my presentation. Thank you very much for the invitation. And well, I'm here if there's any question.
Muchas gracias, estimada Deli.
Thank you, Deli.
Deli nos habló
So Deli spoke about the importance of inclusion of women since they're very young and in the digital world, and as designers and creators, because 75% of the future of the careers in the future will require skills in science, technology, mathematics, and art also. Currently, the participation of women is clear. 22% of professionals in IA are women, and only 12% are researchers in machine learning. So training of girls in STEM is a fundamental resource to create a more inclusive and safe world for women. That's why it's fundamental that the civil society and private and public sector should promote this since a very young age of women and of women's and girls' lives. Techie Brains Makers, along with the Pronatel in Peru, has given one of the first steps, key steps for that, with the program Digital Girls, through which to create from scratch, which is a tool that was created by MIT.
Ha combinado la equidad de género, prevención de violencia basada en género, empoderamiento femenino y la formación en STEM mediante sus talleres Tú igual yo, señales y alcancía digital. Estimada Deli Goicoechea, reiteramos el agradecimiento por la disertación y le invitamos a permanecer en sala para realizar el diálogo en respuesta a las preguntas de las y los participantes. Antes de dar el espacio de preguntas y respuestas, vamos a tener una pausa activa, ya que luego de estos momentos de aprendizaje e intercambio de conocimientos, es fundamental tomar espacio de nuestro tiempo para relajarnos e iniciar una mini sesión de ejercicios físicos durante el teletrabajo. El Horas CONU incentiva el bienestar.
Horas CONU would like to promote the well-being of those of us who are joining us today. And in the next few minutes, we are going to stretch and we're going to share the video for the active break.
Desde el Organismo Andino de Salud, Convenio Hipólito Unanue, estamos muy felices de recibirlos. Así que bienvenidos a fortalecer hoy nuestras piernas. Así que quiero que te sientes más o menos al borde de tu silla. Coges por favor tu silla, sube una pierna, perfecto, estírala, estírala, estírala y la vas a dejar allí. 10, 9, 8, respire. Ay, ya se empezó a sentir. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cambio. Vas a subir la pierna contraria, arriba, estírela, estírela. Separe el muslo del asiento y sosténgase. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bajo, cambie nuevamente, súbala y mire, gire, gire. Circulitos con las piernas, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Perú y Venezuela, hoy trabajando juntos a través del Orascono para fortalecer nuestras piernas. Si se puede, 3, 2, 1 y cambiamos, suba la pierna izquierda, círculo, círculo, parece fácil, pero los que están conmigo saben que se está sintiendo. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, suba nuevamente la otra pierna y mire, va a ser para un lado, para el otro, arriba, abajo, lado, lado, arriba, abajo, si se puede. Ay, cómo se siente. Vamos a sacar pierna el día de hoy. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, baje, baje, perfecto, arriba, 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 abajo, esa es la actitud, arriba, abajo, lado, lado, si se puede, perfecto, domínelo, 3, muy bien, 2, excelente, 1 y descanse, perfecto. Quiero que te sientes más o menos al borde de la silla, muy bien, o porque nos vamos a poner en pie, ponte en pie, una semiflexión de las piernas. Vuelves y te sientas, arriba, 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 perfecto, te sientas, arriba, vamos, vamos a hacer 5, nos quedan 3, arriba, 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 bajo, bajo, nos quedan 2 más, 2, perfecto, 1, 1, 1 y me siento muy bien, perfecto. Bueno, los valientes, los que puedan y no tengan restricciones en rodilla, mira lo que vamos a hacer, suba una pierna, perfecto, nos vamos a poner en pie con una sola pierna. Perfecto, suba, 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 te quedas y bajo despacio, ahí se siente, arriba, 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 te quedas y bajo, si se puede, son 5, arriba, 3, ánimo, ¿cómo se siente? Profe, yo no puedo en una pierna, pues lo haces con las dos, si se puede, arriba, arriba, bajo, me queda una, arriba, descanso, uy, vamos a comparar una pierna con la otra, entonces nos fuimos. Pierna contraria, ponte en pie, bajo, bajo y que haya control. Maneja la respiración, eso es. Regreso, si se puede. Arriba, 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 si se puede. Vamos. 3, muy bien, nos quedan 2, si se puede. 1, 1, 1, arriba y descanso. Ay, ay, ay. ¿Cómo vamos? En Bolivia, en Chile, en Colombia, en Ecuador, en Perú, en Venezuela. ¿Fuertes esas piernas o no? Muy bien. Vas a agarrar los apoyabrazos de tu silla, allí donde está, perfecto. Quiero que suba las piernas, arriba. Muy bien. Piernitas y mire, círculo con las dos piernas. 10, 9, 8, se siente. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y descanso. Ay, 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 ¿cómo se siente? Perfecto, ¿cómo van? Bueno, último ejercicio, último. ¿Listo? Y con este terminamos. Agarra su silla, saca pecho, subo, círculos hacia adentro. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, sonría. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y descansa. Muy bien. Ya esas piernas más fuertes, más musculosas y llegó la hora de estirar. ¿Listo? Perfecto. Ahí donde estás, quiero que lleve las dos piernas al frente. Estire las manos al frente y va a ir simplemente al frente hasta donde pueda. Si puedes tocar rodillas, canillas, zapatos, lo que quieras. Estírate. Te vas a mantener 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, regreso en cámara lenta, perfecto. Trae las dos piernas ahí donde estás, excelente. Mira, ahí flexionadas, abrazas tus dos piernas, abrazas, bajo y sostengo, perfecto. Respiro, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, regreso en cámara lenta y descansas. Muy bien. Bueno, desde el Organismo Andino de Salud, Convenio Hipólito Unanue, muchísimas gracias por venir a esta actividad saludable y sigamos promoviendo un estilo de vida saludable. Un abrazo para todos. Chao, chao.
Excelente. Muchas gracias por
Well,
acompañarnos.
great. Thank you very much for joining us during this active break. I would also like to salute and greet everyone who is logged in today with us. And those who are joining from Brazil, Chile, Cuba, Colombia, United States, Mexico, Spain, Paraguay, Peru, Switzerland, and Venezuela. The ministries of health in the Andean countries, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. The institutions that are joining us today are the Navy Medical Hospital, Red Cross, Peruvian Red Cross, the Roundtable for the Fight Against Poverty in Callao, the National Hospital Daniel Alcides Carrión, the Family Clinic Dr. Ignacio Chavez from Mexico, Regional Hospital from Ica. And then after these greetings, we would like to start now the Q&A round and the dialogue after, with the questions that were asked to Delhi.
A encender sus cámaras. Durante el desarrollo de este webinar hemos tenido múltiples preguntas y haremos lo posible para dar respuesta a la mayoría de ellas.
We will try to answer all of the questions.
Preguntas para Delhi Goicoechea.
For Delhi Goicoechea, what are the aspects that you think are relevant to promote and incentivize girls and women to choose careers in STEM or STEAM? Thank you very much for the question. Thank you, Ruby. I think that at a very young age, we need to start teaching them with tools that are age appropriate and playful, and to tell them that it is not hard. If we talk about programming, there are tools that you don't really need a computer for, or even the Scratch itself. It's programmed already for this to be taught in areas where they don't have connectivities. And so it is important to train the teachers so that they can teach, because this is also another challenge, that children need the tools. We see that we, donate tablets, but they don't have internet. And so that is one of the challenges that we had. And we saw, girls had the apps, but not connectivity. So we need to work with the private sector so that they could donate SIM cards and the girls could participate. And then the other challenge that we had that is also related to tools is that we had girls that, were working on their cell phones, on tablets, or with computers. And so then we had to separate them in groups. You have the different versions of Scratch. There's versions working with tablets and cell phones. And it was a challenge that it was very interesting and to discover what to do. But we were very excited because we saw how the teachers in schools were also invested in this, and how the regional government of Cajamarca and all of us, we got together to be able to achieve this and to give these, workshops, even though there were different circumstances. The important thing is commitment. The important thing is decisiveness and willingness so that girls have the tools and start motivating them.
Muchas gracias por la respuesta. La siguiente pregunta es:
the next question is, have you thought about the challenges to close the digital gap? And well, so I was saying formally, the challenges are these technological challenges, tools, and to have teachers prepared. And we really want to expand our program, Digital Girls. And my dream is not only Peru, but I also want to work with other Latin American governments and to really have a greater participation of all girls. and in all the sectors also. And so that's why we had the Techie Brains Association. It's a nonprofit where we are working in order to achieve this. So it's a challenge, of course. And then this is one of the big challenges. And the other challenges that are the tools. But I think if we really all get together and work towards a common goal, and we all, do what we can, I I think that we are going to create change. We are going to create, we have this teacher, Elizabeth in Cajamarca, who was always there working and talking to the parents. And we did this during the pandemic. So she had to log in and have a Zoom call with the parents, but she was dedicated. And these are hours that are outside her teaching hours. And so, but she was very, very dedicated. And the decision of the government also, because uh, we have talked to other spaces where they say, no, we cannot do it. The teacher is overworked, and we have, and they love the project, but they don't have time to do it. So it's just a matter of decisiveness.
Muchas gracias. Otra pregunta y la última dirigida a ti, Deli. ¿Qué podemos aprender como lecciones rescatadas de los países nórdicos?
And what are the lessons that we can learn from Nordic countries to implement public policies that will promote digitalization at schools? Well, I think we need to learn exactly that, to make those decisions and to really think that we need a budget to work, have to be aware that in order to finish this statistics, we need to start working today with the girls. And that's what happens. And now I am in Canada right now, and there is a program here called Learning, and I am participating and supporting this. And it's I am applying to be the chapter leader in the place where we are. So they start, sowing the seeds in different places. And there's a leader, and the leader starts having free workshops and looking at the teachers that can give these workshops and doing all of the coordination. But this is also paid for by the government and the sponsors. And so it's the only way of doing it, I think. And I think we can also do it. Great. Thank you very much.
Y excelentes las respuestas que ya nos brindaron Katia en el primer espacio y en este segundo, Adeli.
Thank you for everything that you shared. Thank you for all the questions that you asked. And just to wrap up this webinar and the Q&A, we would like to kindly request all the speakers to give 1 minute of a final message or comment. And we will start with Katia. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Deli. I was listening to what you talked, and it's very interesting. And it's hard to close off in a minute, right? In a topic that is so important, and it requires constant dedication and invitation. But I would like to say that, look at the materials and the publications that we have. These are very, user-friendly materials. You can read them and get to know more about this. There is a course on digital skills that the cybersecurity program has with a gender perspective. It's free. And so that is just for you, to know. And I think this is very important. And then the second message would be just to invite you to think about and to really think about this stereotypes and myths, and that security is not something that we can have, and it's a privilege, and to really connect to other women. And this is the same thing that happened with what happened with offline violence, right? It's people started to put this in the spotlight. And so the invitation to everyone, of course, to connect, to share this, and to talk about this. And then you also have my information. If you need additional information, it would be a pleasure to give you the information that you need. Thank you very much for today. Thank you, Katia. Now, Delhi. So I would also like to thank you. I also listened to Katya's presentation and I was very focused on listening to you because it was so interesting. And then as I listened to you, I started to think of things also because, you know, I am a communicator. I started in the communications world and then I moved on to this other world of communication and technology. And so I started thinking about other ideas, right? Maybe we can have a workshop related to security and digital violence. And I think it is very interesting, but this is what's happening now. And so thank you very much for that. And then I just, you know, again, I would like to invite you to keep on generating this kind of spaces and discussion fora and to keep on creating, you know, and opening our eyes and keep on learning. We have so much to learn. And that's why I am also launching in a few days a program that is called Heather's Parents and well, I have 3 kids. And so I'm full of doubts, you know, because I do have a lot of doubts in terms of, you know, technology and my kids. And so I am interviewing 3 or 4 experts where I ask as a mother, because I know that we all have doubts as mothers or fathers. So it's not only if you want to change, it's not only with the young kids. Of course, yes, we need to start at a young age, but we as parents have to educate ourselves too, so that we can educate our children. And this is constant job, and to teach the teachers also, which is also educate the teachers. And so just, you know, keep on doing this and keep on having these kind of spaces. And just to tell you that the only way that we will be able to change today is by educating today and starting today and not being afraid of technology. Technology is with us and we have to use technology to educate. That's my message. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katia, and thank you, Deli, for the important messages that were given. And I just want to again thank our excellent presenters and everyone who is logged in today, and everyone who's always present these webinars, the whole Horas con U team and everyone who participates in this activity that has been possible thanks to the commitment and the integration, Andean and Latin American integration. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Maria del Carmen Calle, Executive Secretary of Horas Conu, for the closing words of this webinar on behalf of the Andean Health Organization Hipólito Unanue Agreement. Well, my first few words are just to thank. I would like to really, really thank Katia and Deli for your knowledge, the knowledge that you have shared today. And definitely we do have much to do, but I think we have made progress. We also have to be positive. I think there's much more to do to achieve these gender equality that we want. And you know, one of them is the area of digital transformation. And I think you've touched upon the most important topics. You've touched upon the most important topics. And when we're talking about gender equality, we're talking about all of the areas of society, and digital transformation is not an exception. And so you've already mentioned that technology can be a very powerful tool to promote gender equality, but it can also exacerbate the inequalities that exist if they are not dealt with in the adequate way. And some key areas of gender equality for it to be considered during digital transformation is first the digital gap. The digital gender gap, it means the difference in the use of technology between men and women. It's important to work to close this gap by ensuring that everyone has equal access to technology and to the opportunities that this provides. And this has been very important in learning with you, Aprendo Contigo, and this program that was implemented during the pandemic. Then also gender stereotypes in technology. This was also mentioned by the speakers. Sometimes technology reflects these stereotypes and the prejudices and myths that, you know, between those who create them and use it. And so it is important to touch upon this, to talk about this, to eliminate prejudices and myths and stereotypes in the development and ensuring that technology is inclusive, and and about the opportunities in technology or STEM careers, of course, definitely this is still a predominantly male industry with very few women in leadership roles. You talked about 1 in 4, and it's important to work to create opportunities for both men and women in technology and to ensure that they are dealt with in terms of diversity and inclusion. And then cyber harassment and bullying and online gender violence, definitely there's new ways of violence and harassment, and they could be especially detrimental because of their scope and persistence. We need to work on this, but there's something that is very important, which is not, you cannot promote what is not known. So really, if we are going to keep on thinking that cyberbullying is just a minor violence, it is definitely a wrong thing to think. This should be considered. We're talking about uses and application of technology in the society, and definitely there are a lot of inequalities, and we know this, there's inequalities. And I think that this is something that we all need to do. Not only it's empowering girls, but it's also having boys understanding that we're all the same. Because we're always saying like, oh yeah, we have to empower girls, we have to empower girls. But I think it's we have to also think about power relationships. Both of them, boys and girls, have to participate from the very beginning, and since they are very little, since the moment they say, oh, okay, how are you going to study maths? Or, you're a little girl, you cannot do that. But this is happening. So we need to be very careful with that. But also we need to be very careful with information that we provide. And you're experts, but sometimes those of us who are not experts, they provide information, and then it turns out that these information that they give, it really completely hinders the whole conceptual framework. And there are basic things that I think we all need to know. And I think this is what we're trying to do, among professionals and parents. And I am not a mother of adolescents. I am a grandmother, and they completely crazy about technology. But then how can I say this nicely? There is a terrible thing, which is the environment and the messages that are given, and the sexist messages that exist. And under, subreptitiously, it's not very open. It's like, how are you going to be an engineering? You're a woman, or women don't have special ideas, etc. Men are are more intelligent in terms of maths, and this is the messages that are start since you're very little. And so you start looking at this and you start thinking, oh wow, in the end, we had an interesting talk at the Congress of Adolescents last year, and what the studies showed is that
que darle duro al arte, ¿no? Porque si no nos vamos a perder en un montón de cosas y el arte es todo lo que conmueve al ser humano, así que no lo podemos dejar de lado, hay que empujarlo. Pero ¿qué nos decían en ese congreso? Perfecto, ya lograste que la chica haga matemática, lograste que, no, se casa y ya no hace nada de matemática. Se olvida porque tienen que criar a los hijos, me dejo entender, yo siempre cuento una anécdota verdadera. Una de mis primas se casó.
I always share an anecdote that I like. One of my cousins married an Egyptian, and so they got to Alexandria. And she was an odontologist, and at some point she was working in California. And so she got in the main room, and all of the diplomas were of women were hanging there, were putting up on the wall. One had graduated in Harvard, another one in Stanford and Princeton. All of them were, brilliant and geniuses, and all of them without really working in their profession. They were just raising their kids. And so when we talk about equality in
desde que ingresan, desde que tienes que darles cargos igualitarios, ¿no? Pero también tienes que darles
We
facilidades
think that we need to give them some facilities so that equality is not only at the work, it's not only the job. You know, I see, oh, there's Rob. It's only one man, but it should not only be at work. Equality is also at the house. So when you have equality in your household, then it's, you know, it's one is equal to the other. You equals me. So it's the same one. I love it. You equals me. And it's like the Ubuntu of African people, you know, because at the end of the day, we all have to go together. Well, thank you very much. It was great, really. I think you have opened our eyes and renewed our, you know, ideas, and we have talked about STEM and girls in digital and technology, and so we are fully convinced that in Women's World Day, where we are looking at the participation and equity and digital transformation, definitely you are leaders and you have enlightened us. So let's be in touch for other meetings and see what we can do, what else we can do in favor of a real, safe, inclusive environment. And that will give the results that favor all of the people in society. So next Tuesday, we will wait for you. We have another webinar about rare diseases, policies and interventions for the exercise of rights of patients with rare diseases. Do not miss this webinar. It's Tuesday, March 14th. Very interesting at 5 p.m. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Forley. Thank you very much to the whole team at the Andean Health Organization that makes it possible that every week we touch upon these topics that are increasingly interesting. The Andean Health Organization, Convenio Hipólito Unanue, we are completely convinced that together we're stronger and together we reach further away. Thank you very much and good afternoon.